In this video, we'll take a look at section 2.5, which is more on graphing linear equations. Now, our first objective, we're going to take a look at graphing linear equations using intercepts. Okay, let's take a look at what intercepts are first. Let's say we had this graph, this linear equation. Now we have two intercepts. Now the point on the graph where the line crosses the x-axis, this is called the x-intercept. Similarly, the point where the line crosses the y-axis, this is called the y-intercept. So our first objective here is we're going to try to find out what these intercepts are, and then we're going to be using these 2 points to graph our line. Now notice with the x-intercept, it lies on the x-axis. Now the only way that this is possible, the only way our line can cross that x-axis is if our y-coordinate is 0. So your y-coordinate has to be 0 in order for it to cross the x-axis. So in order to find the x-intercept, what you're going to do is let y be equal to 0 and then solve for x. Also for the y-intercept, the only way that the line could cross the y-axis is if your x-coordinate is 0. So to find the y-intercept, you're going to let x be equal to 0 and then you're going to solve for y. Let's go ahead and take a look at some examples. So find the intercept and graph the equation. So let's go ahead and try to figure out what the x-intercept is first. So in order to do this, we're going to let y be equal to 0. In other words, we're going to plug 0 in for our y and then solve for x. So we have 4 times 0 minus 12 is equal to negative 6x. Now let's go ahead and solve for x. So simplify, 4 times 0 gives us 0, and we have minus 12 is equal to negative 6x. So this gives us negative 12 is equal to negative 6x. And now we go ahead and divide by negative 6. So that gives us x is equal to 2. So our x-intercept here is 2, 0. So that gives us 1 point for our graph. Now let's figure out what the y-intercept is. So our y-intercept, we're going to let x be equal to 0, and then we're going to solve for y. So we have 4y minus 12 is equal to negative 6 times 0. Now let's go ahead and simplify it. We get 4y minus 12 is equal to 0, and now solve for y. Let's go ahead and add 12 to both sides. We get 4y is equal to 12. And then go ahead and divide both sides by 4 to get y by itself. We get y is equal to 3. So our ordered pair here would be 0, 3. So now that we have these 2 points, we could go ahead and plot these 2 points and then graph our equation. So we have our x-intercept, which is 2, 0, and then we have our y-intercept, which was 0, 3. We have 2 points. We could go ahead and connect the 2 points with each other, and we have our graph. So very similar to creating a table and then choosing some ordered pairs that are solutions to the equation, except we wanted to get these specific ordered pairs. We wanted to get the intercepts. Let's take a look at another example. So this time we have, same type of example, find the intercepts and graph the equation. So we have g of x is equal to 5x minus 5. Okay, so let's start off with our x-intercept. We're going to let y be equal to 0. Okay. So this time we're given function notation. So remember, g of x, this is similar to just y. So g of x is just equal to y. So we're going to change g of x into 0 and then solve for x. So we have 0 is equal to 5x minus 5. Now go ahead and solve for x. So add 5 to both sides. we get 5 is equal to 5x. Divide both sides by 5 to get x by itself. We get x is equal to 1. So that gives us the ordered pair 1, 0. Now to find our y-intercept, we let x be equal to 0. So we have g of 0 is equal to 5 times 0 minus 5. So we get 0 minus 5, which gives us negative 5. Okay, so I replaced all my x's with 0. So now my ordered pair should be 0, negative 5. So let's go ahead and plot these ordered pairs, and we could sketch our graph. So we have 1, 0, which is this point right over here. Then we have 0, negative 5, which is this point. Now that we have 2 points, we could go ahead and connect them with each other. And that gives us the graph of the equation. Let's take a look at one last example like this. So we have 3x minus 4y is equal to 10. We want to find the intercepts and then graph the equation. So let's again start off with the x-intercept. Let y be equal to 0. So you have 3x minus 4 times 0 is equal to 10. So the 4 times 0 just gives us 0. So we're left with 3x is equal to 10. Now go ahead, divide both sides by 3. We get x is equal to 10 thirds. So that gives us the ordered pair 10 thirds, comma 0. Now the y-intercept. Okay, we let x be equal to 0. So we're going to go ahead and plug in 0 for x. We have 3 times 0 minus 4y is equal to 10. Simplify, we get negative 4y is equal to 10, and then go ahead divide by negative 4. Okay, so we get y is equal to, now this is a fraction that we could simplify, we get negative 5 over 2. So we divide each one of those by 2. So we have the ordered pair 0 and then negative 5 halves. So now we have these fractions that we need to graph. Now 10 thirds, this is equivalent to 3 and a third. So 3 goes into 10 3 times, and then there's 1 left over. Negative 5 halves, this is equivalent to negative 2 and 1 half. 2 goes into 5 twice, and there's 1 left over. So 3 and a third, comma 0 would be about this point right over here. And then you have negative 2 and a half. 0, negative 2 and a half would be about right over here. So now we have our intercepts. Go ahead, connect them with each other, and we get our graph. Now let's take a look at our next objective. This is on horizontal and vertical lines. So first let's go ahead and take a look at horizontal lines. Horizontal lines, they have the form y equal to some number, or f of x equal to some number. So when it's an equation, you'll have y equal to some number. If it's written in function notation, it'll just be f of x equal to some number. There won't be like any x's on the right-hand side. Okay. So what your horizontal line will look like is just a horizontal line on the graph. Now, one thing about the slope of horizontal lines, the slope is equal to 0. And we'll take a look at an actual example in a second. Next we have vertical lines. Vertical lines have the form x equal to some number. So if there's no y's in the equation, what that indicates is you have a vertical line. So a vertical line is a straight line going up and down. Now the slopes of vertical lines are undefined. Slope is undefined. Okay. Now let's take a look at examples and how to graph these type of lines. So for our first example, we have f of x is equal to 3. Okay. Remember, this is the same thing as just y equal to 3. So since it's just y equal to some number, that indicates that we're going to have a horizontal line. So you're going to go to where y is equal to 3, which is right over here, and you're going to draw a horizontal line. And you have your graph. That's all you need to do. First, you have to recognize it's a horizontal line. You would go to where y is equal to 3, and then just draw a horizontal line there. Now for this particular problem, we have x is equal to 5. So since it's just x equal to some number, there's no y's in the equation, you're going to go where x is equal to 5. So x is equal to 5 right here. And now you're going to draw a vertical line there. And now we have our graph. Now the last objective in this section is parallel and perpendicular lines. So parallel lines, these are two lines that never intersect each other. Two lines that never intersect, kind of like railroad tracks. Now the reason why these never intersect each other is because the slopes have to be the same. Okay, so if you have two lines with the same slope, that indicates that they are parallel lines. Unless, of course, it's the same exact line. Then they would not be parallel because they intersect each other at every point. Okay, so it has to be the different line, and it has to be a different line. And if the slopes are the same, that means that they are parallel. Now, perpendicular lines, these are two lines that intersect at a 90-degree angle. So the angle that they intersect at has to be 90 degrees. Now, in order for two lines to intersect at a 90-degree angle, their slopes have to be opposite reciprocals of each other. Okay, so if two lines have slopes that are opposite reciprocals of each other, that means that these are perpendicular lines. So opposite reciprocal means, so if one line had a slope of 2/3, the other line would have to have a slope of -3/2. That would make them opposite reciprocals. Let's take a look at an example. Now, determine whether the graphs of the given ordered pair of lines, are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Okay. So in order for us to figure out if they're parallel, perpendicular, or neither, we're not going to sit there and graph each one and then try to see if they're ever going to intersect or not. All we have to do is figure out what the slopes are. If the slopes are the same, they're parallel. If the slopes are opposite reciprocals, they are perpendicular. If neither of those conditions are satisfied, they're neither parallel nor perpendicular. Okay, let's start off with the first equation. So we have x plus 4 is equal to y. Now I'm going to rewrite this so it's my y going first, so I have y is equal to x plus 4. Now my equation is in slope-intercept form. It's in y equals mx plus b form. So I could read off what the slope is for that first equation, for the first line. My slope there is 1. Now I have to figure out what my slope is for my second line. So I have y minus x is equal to -3. So I'm going to go ahead and add x to both sides. So that way I get my equation in slope-intercept form. And now I can determine my slope, which is 1. So remember, the slope is the number in front of your x. So my first line, my slope is 1. My second line, my slope is also 1. So slopes are equal, which means that the two lines are parallel. So we didn't even have to graph this at all. Okay, all we did is we found out what the slopes were, and we were able to determine if they're parallel or perpendicular. Let's take a look at another example. So our first equation, we have y plus 4 is equal to 3x. So we want to determine if these two lines are parallel or perpendicular in either. So I'm going to go ahead and solve for y so I can get into slope-intercept form. I get y is equal to 3x minus 4. And now I can determine my slope is 3. Now my second equation, 4x minus y is equal to negative 7. I want to go ahead and solve for y, so I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. I have negative y is equal to negative 4x minus 7. And now go ahead, divide by negative 1 to get y completely by itself. You get y is equal to 4x plus 7. So now my slope over here is 4. So if you take a look at the two slopes, you can see that they are not equal to each other, so they're not parallel. And these two slopes, they are not opposite reciprocals of each other. So these two lines are neither. They're not parallel and they are not perpendicular. Let's take a look at a couple more. So I have y is equal to 4x plus 5. This is my first equation. It's already in slope-intercept for me. So I can read off the slope, which is 4. Now my second equation, I have 2y is equal to 8x plus 10. Solve for y, so go ahead, divide both sides by 2. You get y is equal to 4x plus 5. So my slope is also 4 here. So I ended up getting the same slope for each line, but be careful here, because if you take a look at the two equations, these are exactly the same, meaning this is the same exact line. So even though they have the same slope, that's not going to make them parallel because they're actually the same line. So these two lines, these are neither as well. Let's put same exact line. Because remember, the definition of parallel lines is they cannot intersect. So of course they do have to have the same slope. They have to have the same slope, but they can't intersect either. So if it's exactly the same line, they're going to be intersecting. One last one. So we have 2y minus x is equal to 2. Let's go ahead and get the y by itself. So we have 2y is equal to x plus 2. Now divide both sides by 2 to get y by itself. This gives us y is equal to 1/2 x plus 1. So my slope is 1/2. Let's take a look at the other equation. So we have y plus 2x is equal to 4. Subtract 2x from both sides, get in slope-intercept form. You get y is equal to negative 2x plus 4. So my slope here is negative 2. So you could tell right away that these slopes are not the same. So that means they are not parallel. Then check to see if the slopes are opposite reciprocals of each other. Okay. So remember, negative 2, this is the same as negative 2 over 1. So when you write that out as a fraction, you can see that these slopes, these are indeed opposite reciprocals, which means that the two lines are perpendicular. Meaning if you graph them, they will intersect at a 90-degree angle. So that was it for section 2.5. Make sure to email me if you have any questions.